All right, let's kick off this deep dive. We're going all in on crypto regulations in 2024. I know you're all ears to figure out, what new rules are coming and how they'll impact the crypto market. So let's not waste any time and jump right in. For this deep dive, we've got some awesome sources lined up. We're talking about the Atlantic Council's Cryptocurrency Regulation Tracker, a sharp policy analysis from Plural Policy, and a breakdown from Bankrate to keep us grounded.
Yeah, it's going to be a wild ride for sure. The regulatory landscape is shifting like crazy, and the choices made in 2024, they're going to leave their mark on the future of crypto big time.
For sure. The Atlantic Council's tracker lays it all out, where we stand globally, and it's pretty mind-blowing. Crypto's totally legal in 12 G20 countries. Think about that. That's like over 57% of the world's GDP. But then on the flip side, you've got 17 countries with partial bans and 10 with full bans. It's like a tug of war out there.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. It's this clash, right? This tension between how decentralized crypto is and that old school need for control in finance. But here's the kicker. Even with all these bans, the tracker shows people in a lot of those countries are still using crypto like crazy. It's like you can't put the genie back in the bottle, can you?
Nope, doesn't look like it.
Yeah.
People are
Yeah.
hooked on the promise of, financial freedom, accessibility outside the traditional systems.
Absolutely. It just proves that simply trying to outlaw crypto, it's like, well, not the smartest strategy, right?
Right. So what we need is, a more, what's the word? A more sophisticated approach. One that acknowledges the potential upsides of crypto while still addressing the concerns. Things like keeping consumers safe and keeping the whole financial system stable.
Right, exactly. We need balance. And speaking of different approaches, the tracker really shows just how different things are around the world. I mean, you've got Europe aiming for this, like uniformity with MiCA, while Asia, it's all over the place. You got China with a total ban, then Japan's embracing crypto, and then there's Hong Kong. They're making this strategic play to be a crypto hub. It's
Yeah.
a wild mix.
Yeah, it's like watching a global experiment unfold in real time, right?
Huh.
Every region is doing its own thing. It'll be interesting to see which ones work out in the end.
Absolutely. It's going to be fascinating to see how this all plays out.
So let's dive into some of these specific regulations that are in the works. Europe's MiCA, that's probably the one everyone's talking about right now. It's supposed to fully kick in 2024. And the goal is to harmonize those crypto regulations across all the EU member states. Big deal, right?
For sure. What's interesting about MiCA is that it might actually become like the global standard, like a model for other regions to follow.
Makes sense. If it works for Europe, why not for everyone else?
Right. And when you look at Plural Policy's analysis, there are some key things in MiCA that are really worth pointing out. For example, there'll be licensing requirements for like all those crypto service providers, exchanges and stuff.
So they have to meet certain standards,
Yeah.
right, to operate and, make sure things are secure.
Yep. And they've got to prove they can handle security too.
It's kind of like taking what we have in traditional finance and adapting it to the whole crypto world.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. And then there's stable coins. MiCA, it really zeroes in on stable coins. They're going to require issuers to have enough reserves to back up their tokens, prove they can actually handle people cashing out.
That's huge, especially after what happened with Terra USD last year. That shook everyone up and showed just how fragile some of these stablecoins can be.
Definitely. Regulators, they're taking notes. They're trying to prevent those kinds of meltdowns from happening again.
Yeah, it's about protecting investors and also just, building trust in the whole crypto market.
You got it. It's about stability. MiCA also makes consumer protection a priority. They'll be making crypto companies spell out all those risks involved in investing, and they'll need to have good systems for handling customer complaints.
So transparency and accountability.
Yeah, exactly. So Europe's taking this really proactive and comprehensive approach with MiCA. But what about the U.S.? What's on the horizon for us here in 2024?
That's the big question, right?
It is. And the situation in the U.S., it's a bit more complicated.
Well, that's putting it mildly. It's a bit of a mess, right? As it stands, every agency seems to view crypto differently.
Yeah, and that's created a lot of confusion for everyone involved.
Well, Bankrate breaks it down pretty clearly. The SEC thinks crypto's securities, the IRS calls it property, and the CFTC, they're all about commodities. It's like a regulatory maze.
Absolutely. But there's a glimmer of hope, actually.
Oh, tell me more. I'm all ears.
Well, Plural Policy, they're predicting that Congress might actually pass some comprehensive crypto legislation in 2024. It's what a lot of people in the industry have been pushing for. It could really shake things up in the U.S. crypto market.
So a game changer, like potentially.
Yeah, potentially. So what would this legislation focus on? Well, It's hard to say for sure, but based on all the talk and the bills that are out there right now, it'll likely tackle some of the big issues.
Okay, so let's unpack that a bit. What are some of those big issues, the ones that everyone's kind of grappling with?
Well, one of the biggest sticking points is figuring out which crypto assets are securities and which ones fall under the jurisdiction of other agencies.
Because that determines like how they're regulated and what kinds of investor protections apply.
Exactly. If you don't have clear definitions, it's like trying to fit square pegs into round holes. And the legislation is likely to include provisions on stablecoin regulation, consumer protection measures, and all those anti-money laundering rules.
It sounds like the U.S. might be moving towards a more, well, a more unified approach. Kind of like what we're seeing with MiCA in Europe, right?
Yeah, there are definitely some similarities, but it's important to remember that the U.S. will probably carve its own path, taking into account how things work here in the U.S.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how it all unfolds, for sure.
No doubt.
Now, we've talked a lot about regulations for exchanges, stable coins, consumer protection, the big players. But what about DeFi? Decentralized finance. It seems like regulations are still kind of playing catch up in that space.
Yeah, you're right. DeFi is still pretty much unregulated, which has its pluses and minuses, right?
Yeah, it's a double-edged sword, right?
Definitely. On the one hand, it lets things move fast, lots of innovation and experimentation. But on the flip side, there's more risk for users, especially those who might not really grasp how complex these decentralized platforms can be.
So how do you see regulations evolving in the DeFi space, looking ahead?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? It's tricky because the whole point of DeFi is decentralization. So how do you apply traditional regulatory frameworks to that?
Right. It's like trying to regulate a swarm of bees.
Exactly. But regulators, they're starting to wrap their heads around the unique challenges of DeFi. They're looking for ways to manage the risks without killing innovation. Maybe by focusing on regulating those points where DeFi interacts with the centralized financial world.
So like creating some kind of, I don't know, like a checkpoint at the entrance to a city, even if the city itself has its own set of rules inside.
Yeah, that's a good way to think about it.
It's not like 2024 is going to be a year of like walking a tightrope for regulators,
Yeah.
trying to strike that balance between protecting users and letting innovation flourish.
It certainly will be, but I think it's an exciting time to be in the crypto space. With the right regulations, we can really unleash the full potential of blockchain technology and, maybe even create a more inclusive and equitable financial system along the way.
Right, and Elliptic, they're talking about this really interesting trend on the horizon, this fusion of AI and crypto. Sounds pretty futuristic.
It does, right. But it's not as far out there as you might think. We're already seeing AI being used in crypto. For example, some trading platforms are using AI algorithms for trading and even finding market opportunities.
So AI is basically becoming a crypto trader.
In a sense, yeah. But it's not just about trading. It's about fraud detection, assessing risk, even creating completely new kinds of digital assets.
This could change the game for the entire industry.
Yeah, it really could. But it also brings up some big questions about how to regulate these new technologies.
So what are some of the regulatory concerns when it comes to AI and crypto?
Well, one thing that's a big concern is data privacy. If we're using AI to analyze tons of data about crypto transactions and how users behave, how do we make sure that data is being used responsibly, ethically,
That's a really good point. We've already seen in other industries that messing up with data privacy can really destroy trust.
Exactly. Another worry is algorithmic bias. AI is only as good as the data it learns from. So if that data is biased, it can lead to some pretty unfair or discriminatory outcomes.
It's not just about the tech, it's about the human element, making sure these AI systems are built and used fairly.
Exactly. And then there's the potential for, well, misuse. Could people use AI to create new types of scams or maybe manipulate markets in ways we haven't even thought of yet?
That's a scary thought. As these technologies evolve, we definitely have to think about those kinds of risks. So it seems like regulators have their work cut out for them.
They do, but I'm optimistic. I think if regulators, industry players, and the AI experts work together, we can harness the power of AI while keeping those risks in check.
So zooming out a bit, 2024 looks like it's going to be a huge turning point for crypto regulation.
It is. We're at a crossroads, and the choices we make this year will shape the future of crypto. Big time.
And, I'm curious, what other trends or areas of focus should we be watching out for? Anything that maybe isn't getting a lot of attention right now, but could have a big impact down the road?
That's a great question. And there's one area that I think really deserves more attention. It's Labinina. It's the intersection of crypto and ESG. That's environmental, social, and governance concerns.
ESG, huh?
Yeah,
Yeah, I've heard that term, like, everywhere lately, especially when people
yeah.
talk about investing. What's the connection to crypto?
Think about crypto mining. Especially for those proof of work blockchains like Bitcoin, it takes a lot of energy to mine those coins. And that sparks some serious concerns about, well, the environmental impact of crypto, especially its carbon footprint.
Yeah, no kidding. I've seen those articles about how some mining operations use as much electricity as entire countries.
It's a legitimate concern. I think we'll see more and more pressure from regulators and investors for the crypto industry to go green, to become more sustainable. We might see regulations that encourage using renewable energy for mining, or maybe push for those more energy efficient blockchain technologies, like proof of stake.
So kind of like what we've seen with electric cars and solar panels in other industries. Crypto's got to clean up its act too.
Exactly. And it's not just about the environment either. The S&G and ESG are important too. We've already talked about how important consumer protection is in crypto, and well, that's part of social responsibility.
Right, makes sense. So what about the G, the governance part?
Well, in crypto, governance is all about transparency, accountability, and how decisions are made, within those decentralized protocols and organizations. Regulators are starting to pay more attention to this, especially in the DeFi space, where sometimes those clear governance structures are missing.
So it's not enough to just regulate the technology, right?
Okay.
You've got to make sure the people behind it, the organizations, the communities, they're all operating responsibly and ethically.
You got it. I think those ESG factors will be front and center in the coming years, not just for regulators, but also for investors who want their money to align with their values.
Sounds like the crypto world is getting more and more connected to the real world with all its, well, all its complications.
Definitely. Crypto's not in its own little bubble anymore. It's becoming part of the global financial system, which means it needs to play by the same rules as everyone else.
Well, this deep dive has given me a lot to think about, that's for sure. Looks like 2024 is going to be a year of big changes for crypto, and regulations are going to be a major driving force.
Absolutely. It's an exciting time to be watching this all unfold, and I'm optimistic. I think with the right approach, we can build a crypto ecosystem that's innovative and responsible, one that promotes growth, protects users, and is sustainable for the long haul.
That's the dream. Any last words of wisdom for our listeners as they navigate this ever-changing landscape?
Stay informed, stay curious, and don't be afraid to ask questions. Things change so quickly in the crypto world, you have to keep learning. Remember, knowledge is power, especially when you're making decisions about your crypto investments.
Great advice. And don't forget all those resources we've mentioned throughout this deep dive. They're a great place to start your own research. So dive in, explore, and stay plugged into this dynamic and fascinating world.
It deserves more attention, this link between crypto and ESG, the environmental, social, and governance stuff.
ESG, yeah. I've definitely heard that term getting tossed around, especially in the investing world. But what's the tie-in with crypto?
Well, you know how crypto mining can be like really energy intensive, especially with those proof of work blockchains like Bitcoin. All that mining, it's raised some red flags about the environmental impact, crypto's carbon footprint.
Oh, yeah, I've seen articles, about those mining operations that guzzle as much electricity as some entire countries. It's crazy.
It's definitely a big deal, and I think we're going to see regulators and investors pushing harder for the crypto world to get its act together, become more sustainable. We might even see some regulations that like reward using renewable energy for mining or maybe encourage switching to more energy efficient blockchain tech like proof of stake.
So it's like that push we've seen for electric cars and solar panels.
Mm.
Crypto needs to jump on that bandwagon too.
Exactly. And it's not just about the planet either. The S&G and ESG matter too. We talked about consumer protection in crypto, and well, that's part of being socially responsible, right?
Right, that makes sense. So what about the G then? The governance piece.
Governance, well, in crypto, it's about transparency, accountability, how decisions get made in those like decentralized protocols and organizations. Regulators are starting to pay more attention to that, especially in DeFi, where those clear structures, those governance structures, sometimes they're just not there.
So it's not just about regulating the tech itself. It's about making sure the people behind it, those organizations, communities, that they're all doing things the right way, ethically.
Exactly. I think those ESG factors, they're going to become more and more important, in the next few years, not just for regulators, but for investors who, well, they want to put their money where their values are.
Sounds like the crypto world is like merging with the real world.
Yeah.
With all its complexities and everything.
Definitely. Crypto isn't off in its own little corner anymore. It's part of the global financial system now, which means, well, it's got to adapt to the same rules and expectations as everyone else.
This deep dive has given me a lot to think about. It seems like 2024 is going to be a really, really important year for crypto, especially with all these regulations that'll shape its future.
Yeah, for sure. It's a really interesting time to be following this stuff, and I'm hopeful. I think with the right approach, we can build a crypto ecosystem that's innovative and responsible. One that grows, protects users, and it's built to last.
That's what we're all hoping for. Any final thoughts for our listeners as they navigate this, well, this constantly changing landscape?
Stay informed, stay curious, and don't be shy about asking questions. Crypto, it never stands still, so you got to keep learning. Remember, knowledge is power, especially when it comes to making smart decisions about your crypto investments.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And hey, don't forget those resources we've talked about. They're a great starting point for your own research. So dive in, explore, and stay tuned to this crazy, amazing world of crypto.